Thank you for joining us. Man, it's excited to see all these faces. My screen is popping. It just keeps all these people adding on. We're so happy for you to join us during our Asian American, South Asian, Indian, and Pacific Islander Education Leaders Networking events. Margarita and I are really working to provide spaces for people to talk, to engage in dialogue, to have some discussion, and just gather to get to know each other, and really to enjoy this community. I think that we are facing some very challenging times, discussions around race, discussions around equity. We are having these conversations in all these different circles, and they're needed. It's been time for us to discuss these issues and what it means to all of us, what it means to be leaders in education, and what it means to lead children and educate them. And we want to talk about what our journeys are through this and what this means to each of us, and how we can move forward and learn from each other. And so I want to hand things over. So I'm really glad to have everyone here. We may have, right now we have about 60 participants, and the number keeps rising. We had almost 200 people register for this event. So we're so excited to have all of your voices here, to meet and talk. We're so excited to have this opportunity to network together, to really to share our experiences. And with that, I want to hand it over. Maybe I should do this as well. Sometimes I just get to talking, I get so excited, and I have to introduce myself. My name is Adene Mack. I am the Senior Director for Equity Services at the Association of California School Administrators. And I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us. I get so excited sometimes I forget to introduce myself. And so what I want to do right now is introduce my colleague and my partner in crime, Margarita Cuizon-Armelino, to say a few words and then introduce our speaker this afternoon.
Hey guys, thanks Adne. Great to see so many people turn up for our networking event. I'm very excited to have this conversation with all of you. It's so important. But before I introduce our esteemed speaker today, I wanted to share with you some information that we collected before the event through our thought exchange. And get your camera phones ready, because I'm going to share with you the word cloud that it generated, as well as some of the top thoughts that that was generated through the survey. So Josh, am I able to share my screen?
Yes, you can now. Go ahead.
Great, okay. All right, so sorry about my desktop, you guys, it's messy. But here's the word cloud that thought exchange generated. Look at the words on there, see if anything resonates with you. Feel free to tweet that out and use hashtag ACSA to let people know that you're part of this conversation today and the importance of why we're having it. So I'll just leave that up for a couple more seconds, and then I'll switch over to the top thoughts. So can you guys see my screen? Here are the top thoughts. And the question that we asked before this webinar was, what stereotypes do you think others still believe about Asian Americans, South Asian, Indians, and Pacific Islanders? And the thoughts that most resonated with the people who participated in the thought exchange were these three things. So model minority myth, assuming success damages Asian Americans who struggle learning. They're usually also led to a higher standard than their non-Asian peers. The second one is Asian American female leaders are quiet in workforces. This is a terrible expectation and assumption to have, because the minute we speak up, suddenly we are loud and problematic. And then the third one was that we are all introverted, quiet, and lack presence. That we are better fit as worker bees. This assumption is counter to preferred Western leadership characteristics and often lead to AAPIs being overlooked for leadership positions. So just, let that ruminate and, think about that and how that impacts you and some of these stereotypes, influence your leadership and the way you advocate for people of color and for ourselves. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And at this point, I am going to introduce to you our keynote speaker. And we're very pleased to be able to bring her into this conversation. She's a very well-decorated and highly respected Asian American leader who's going to share with us her experience as a Chinese American moving up the ranks of educational leadership. Dr. Mary Sieu has been with ABC Unified School District since 1989 and has served as superintendent since 2012. Prior to that, Dr. Sieu was the Deputy Superintendent and Assistant Superintendent of Academic Services. Dr. Sieu has been recognized for her outstanding leadership by ACSA, and she's been ACSA's Valuing Diversity Award winner, ACSA Region 15's Administrator of the Year, ACSA's State Superintendent of the Year. She was also recognized by Senator Alan Lowenthal as California Woman of Distinction, and she was the 32nd Senatorial District's Woman of the Year. And most recently, Dr. Sieu was selected as the Superintendent of the Year by Education Dive K-12. The Dive Awards recognize the industry's top disruptors and innovators. She's amazing, and we can't wait to learn from her story. So with that, I give you Dr. Mary Sieu.
Thank you so much, Margie. And first of all, thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm going to use a PowerPoint slide today in my discussion with all of you. If we can pull that up. As Margie just said, first of all, I just need to let everyone know that this is officially my 30th year in ABC Unified School District. And this is also my 9th year as superintendent of ABC. But one of the things that I wanted to really discuss with you are some of the glass and bamboo ceilings that we all experience, as well as some strategies and techniques to perhaps fight off some of these issues that we're dealing with. Next. So one of the things that I do every year for the past 22 years now, I work with all of our leadership institutes during the summer before we open our school year. And every time we have done this, I always use the word lead. Leading with stories. This past year is leading with heart, leading with collaboration, leading with family. And so this is a very important piece that we have done in ABC Unified School District. And so the other thing that I think it's very important to also note, next, is that great leaders don't set out to be a leader. They set out to make a difference. It's never about the role, it's always about the goal. And this was by Lisa Haisha, who indicated that for us, I did not really aspire to be a superintendent one day. But one of the things that is so important is to be able to tell stories. Next. Everybody's story is important. This is my mother at the age of 16 holding a book. Just to let you know that I came from a family of 7, but we were also very poor. I remember my father only earned an income of about $5,000 for a family of 7. But this picture always resonated with me because my mom was always carrying a book, and she was a gifted student as well. Next. My story includes being born in the back of a laundry with 7 people. I remember that during my life, I was not only an English learner because we only spoke Cantonese at home, but it was about being able to share that story with others. For a long, long time, I wasn't able to share my story because I was too embarrassed to share the story of my life with other people. But this is important to be able to share it so that others can also see where you have started to where you are going. Next. So in 8th grade, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I was the president of the Future Teachers of America when I was in 8th grade. 8 years later, I started my very first assignment in the Chicago Public Schools. It was in an all African American neighborhood, but it was one of the most exciting experiences that I lived through, even to this very day, because every experience is going to help you along the way. Next. But then after 15 years of teaching, I realized that I also wanted to experience where my mother and father lived. And so I decided to return to China and lived in Sichuan province. I am the one of two women. I was the teacher, but I'm the one of two women on the first row in Sichuan province. It was an almost all male engineering college that I worked in. Next. So one of the things that I know that many of you are aware of the term the glass ceiling, because in ABC Unified School District, after 55 years, I was the very first woman superintendent for the district, as well as the first Asian American superintendent for the district. Next. One of the things that I know that a senior writer at Fortune magazine said that the processes and barriers that serve to exclude Asian and Asian Americans from executive positions are some of the things such as lack of leadership potential, lack of communication skills that can't actually be explained by either your job performance or your qualifications. Next. And here's one that I hope that all of you have read, and it's Jane Hyun, who talks a great deal about breaking the bamboo ceiling. This is a combination of individual, cultural, and organizational factors that impede Asian Americans' career progress inside organizations. Next. So one of the things, as Margie just shared in terms of the cloud words, where some of these are the stereotypes that still exist today, that we're a model minority, that we're meek, that we're worker bees, conformists, obedient, that we value self-control over self-expression. We have a great respect for elders, and sometimes I have been even called a dragon lady, and that we look good on paper. Now, that's not to say that these things are not valuable, because some of them are. But here are some ways that we can also perhaps break some of the stereotypes. Next. We know that 44% of Asian Americans over 25 are college graduates, the largest percentage of any racial groups. And yet only 28% of Asian Americans say that they are comfortable being themselves at work, compared with roughly another percentage of American workers. Next. So we know that there are cultural differences, that hard work alone isn't enough. We all know that the term, the nail that sticks up gets hammered down, that there are values in Asian culture. And again, I'm not stereotyping them, but the blending in, being humble, working hard, these perhaps are not the same success indicators in Western cultures. And that there are differences in Asian cultures as well as nationalities, and problems with being homogenized as one group of people, yet very similar in Asian traits. Next. I have a 35-year-old son. We know there are generational perspectives and differences. And so we know that the millennial generation Asians would be very different from perhaps the baby boomer Asians. Next. We also know that the glass ceiling, that females are held to a higher standard than the males. I believe there's only about 25% women superintendents in California today. A man is seen as a boss, but a woman is viewed as being bossy. Next. We also know that in the workplace, perception is often a reality, that confidence, articulation, other factors impact people's perception of you in your workplace. Next. We also know that leadership is not about being in charge. Leaders are about taking care of those in your charge. Next. Here are some things that I hope that many of you are able to look at some of the strategies. For the last several years, for almost 5 years, our district has held an Equity Institute. And these are people of every racial and ethnic perspectives in our district. But it's about stepping out and also stopping when mutual respect or purpose are at risk. It's about investing in mentoring relationships. Just to let you know that many, many years ago, I remember calling someone at the district office so that I can be an unpaid administrative intern in our district. And that was 31 years ago when the woman said to me, "Absolutely, please come, we'll find a place for you." I'll never forget that, because right after that year, she created a position for me to stay in ABC. It's about building a network for the long term. It's asking for resources. And please don't be afraid to be different, just be yourself. Next. Here are the things that I have committed to in our district. I'm very passionate about international exchange programs. And so we established over 21 years ago a commitment with Kakamigahara, Japan. But we also created another set of international programs at the middle school level with China, and they still exist today at many of our high schools. We also had relationships with Australia as well as in Brazil, because this is something I'm very passionate about, but it's also being able to make a difference in the lives of others, especially our students, as well as our staff members. Next. Another thing that I'm also very passionate about are our parents and our community members. The center picture is one of all of our board members involved. It's very diverse, but we have held over 22 years of our Parent Leadership Conference and Academy with over 400 parents coming at the same time, with multiple translation services that are provided for them, from Spanish to Korean to Chinese especially. And this is a very important thing for us. And I know that in 2015, it won the National School Boards Association's Magna Award for $5,000. Next. And another thing that I'm also very pleased is the relationship that I've had with our labor management collaboration. We have what is called a PAL, or Partnership with Administration and Labor, a PAL conference. We've held this now for over 22 years. And this year, we decided to do it virtually. And so it's an important piece, because during our emergency crisis with COVID-19, it would not have been possible to do some of the very things that we were able to accomplish without that wonderful labor management collaboration that we have with not only our teachers, but also our classified staff as well. Because, for example, we handed out over 5,800 devices as well as hotspots for our students who did not have them available. And we also were able to change the grading process, the graduation system in our district. But all of these things had to have been a part of a collaboration that we have with all of our employees. Next. So here are some strategies again. Please step out of individual success mode. Please put yourself and analyze yourself as part of a team. Don't depend on your accomplishments to speak for themselves. Be persistent and assertive in a style that fits you. Establish mutual purpose and mutual respect during tough conversations. Again, under a book called #Fully Charged, it's not about the role or title of a leader that we are focused on developing, but rather the capacity, the competence, confidence, compassion, and creative, critical thinking it takes to strengthen, encourage, and care for ourselves, especially for others. I know that we're going to have a Q&A session in our breakout sessions, but I did also include my information at the end of the slide to have people who want more information about any of these things to please feel free to contact me. Do we have any questions or those who put them in the chat room?
Okay, I don't see any questions in the being dropped into the chat. Oh, there's one. As a female superintendent, how have you seen the position evolve?
I'm going to have to share with you that on the very first day, the very first week of my superintendency, I remember that all the network channel news were on our doorsteps. And it was because of my predecessor who, unfortunately, the administrator who was involved filed a lawsuit against the district. But here's what I learned from that experience. We settled, in the lawsuit, but one of the things that I've learned is the fact that it's very important to listen very carefully. You spend more time listening than you do talking, in my opinion, because it's listening to not only your Board of Education, but also, for example, the board that hired me 9 years ago is not the same board today. We're much more diverse today than ever, but it's a very dynamic board still. So when you ask about how has the position evolved over time, it's important to recognize that please understand that you will always have the unexpected happen every year. Always the unexpected will be occurring every year. We would never have imagined that we would have had to close our schools since March the 16th this year in terms of the COVID-19. But that's something that we were all prepared to do, because when we handed out the multiple devices and hotspots, at least 93 to 94% of our students were still engaged with our distance learning program. And so that was very critical for us. It will evolve over time, but it does include being a part of a major team that is necessary for you to move forward with. It's not just the superintendent acting alone, it's having to be a part of a major team that's important.
Mary, we have time for just a couple more. And so I see here, how much of your district demographics do you represent?
So in ABC Unified School District, there are 45% Hispanic Latinos, 38% Asian American Pacific Islanders. We also have about 5.9% African American. And there are many that are biracial now in our district. and we only have about less than 6% who are Caucasian.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll ask this one last question. And then to Carol Fong, I want to say that your question might be answered in the small group. Okay, so I won't ask this one of Mary, but Sheena put up a question. How do you find mentors when you don't see leaders that look like you?
But the leaders don't necessarily have to look like me, in my opinion. My mentor, who accepted me, was Hispanic Latino when I first came into our district. We spent a lot of time talking through the department needs and goals, but she actually was not Asian at all. So it's possible that you can find mentors and relationships with others that don't look like you. But it's important to find someone you feel comfortable with to begin with, that you can have a relationship with to move forward.
Okay, thank you, Mary. We're going to have the group break out into small group sessions now. If I could get my 4 lead small group facilitators to introduce themselves, and then Josh is going to just kind of break the group up evenly, so you'll end up in one of these rooms. So I'll start with, I see Bhavna at the top of my screen, so I'm just going to ask you to start, Bhavna.
And we are matching our virtual backgrounds too.
We are.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bhavna Narula, and I am the principal at Lakme Intermediate School, a school I call the best junior high on the planet, in Los Altos School District in the heart of Silicon Valley. I am the first administrator of color who was hired by the district, that is primarily Caucasian. I'm looking forward to learning from all of you in my group today, and hopefully moving the conversation forward.
I'm going to call on Shayna because I see you next.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Shayna Henry. I am a middle school principal in Sacramento, California. I'm actually transitioning from one middle school to another one that we get to design from the ground up. So exciting times at the moment. I'm excited to be with you here this evening and engage in this dialogue. So Margie, thank you for putting this together.
You're welcome. Isaac.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Isaac Wong. I am an elementary school principal at Madrone Elementary School in Thousand Oaks, California, out in Ventura County. And I'm excited to be here and looking forward to this wonderful dialogue and expand upon this conversation.
Thank you, Isaac. And our last small group lead is Tracy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tracy Noriega. I'm finishing up my 23rd year in New Haven Unified School District as my last position, the Director of K through 12 Instruction. Beginning July 1st, I'll be the Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services in San Lorenzo Unified here in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Awesome, thanks you guys. Okay, so Josh is gonna do his magic and you're gonna end up in one of their rooms. So just sit tight for a second.
A couple minutes.
Oh, we have a couple minutes? Okay, well, maybe we can,
Margie?
Yes?
Would you like to speak on the process after the breakout sessions, just so that all of our audience understands?
Yes. So after the breakouts, we are going to come back together. All the questions in the rooms are the same. They're going to walk you through 5 questions that we put together for you to have your discussions around. And then after about 20 or 30 minutes of those discussions, we'll come back into this bigger group so that the groups can kind of report out and share what some of the most relevant thoughts were that were taking place in the room, that were being shared in the room. And then we'll jump off from there. So we will come back as a larger group after the small group discussions. Okay, well, while we're waiting, does anyone want to ask Mary more questions? Or Adne? I think Naj's on somewhere too. Naj, are you here? Do you want to introduce yourself really quick?
Hey, everybody. Naj Alikhan, ACSA's Senior Director of Marketing and Communications. It's great to participate with all of you, so thank you for having me.
Thanks, Naj. Okay, so while we're waiting, I do see a question. Oh, I don't see a question. I see, does anyone want to drop a question while we're waiting? And since your mic is open, you can just ask it.
For someone who's wanting to move up, what's the best way to start networking?
If that question is directed to me, I think the best way to network is to be able to have incredible relationships along the way, no matter what positions they happen to be at, whether they're in a clerical position or in an assistant superintendent's position. It's important because I don't look at people with their titles. I look at people for themselves. And so it's important that the relationships you have are going to be prominent regardless of what their titles are in your district.
Thank you.
I'm going to take a picture of you guys while we're waiting. So can everyone smile? There's 4 pages of you. So I'm going to, the first page, smile. Just keep smiling in case you're on the page that I'm on. Okay, next. Keep smiling. Keep smiling. Last page, keep smiling. Yay, thank you. That's gonna go on social media. I think we're all back. Are we all back?
Yep.
Okay, great, great. Well, I know in our group, we had a great discussion in there. And so this is the time where you guys, those of you that are comfortable enough, can share, or perhaps the leads in the room can share some of the information that was gleaned from the small group discussions. Like, what were some of the stories that resonated in there? Anyone want to volunteer, or I'm going to have to call on people?
I can share for a breakout room too.
Thank you, Tracy.
We actually read through all of the questions, and so it was kind of, yeah, we were all over the place, but connected. And so I think, you know, we really talked about this time being an opportunity for change, right? We're going into perhaps blended learning, virtual learning, you know, in the fall, depending on where we are, but you know, also taking into account, you know, what the needs are of our students. And of course, we talked about equity and access. We talked about how our curriculum can get decolonized, whether online or, you know, in person. We really did also talk about, you know, this aspect of the model minority myth and how it's a construct of white supremacy culture, right? And so just being really conscious of where we are, who, you know, where we sit, who, you know, who we affect, how we advocate, and always, you know, looking out for, you know, really just being reflective of our experiences, our lived experiences, so that we stay conscious of, you know, what we are not doing. There was some strategies shared out from folks in terms of what's been done in the district, revisiting equity policies, creating groups that, you know, create racial solidarity, you know, really revisiting the policies and practices moving forward. There was a want for more information on specific API groups. So perhaps, you know, as ACSA, we can look to providing that. I know we had talked about that previously. So wanting more information about different communities. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And yes, I can provide some, at least some demographics based on membership data around that. Okay, who wants to go next?
I can go next. Reporting from Breakout Group 1, we had an awesome group. We kind of started talking about looking in and then looking out, right? How does our own experience inform? And we, you know, our group members shared the work that they've been doing at their school sites in terms of moving forward the conversation around bias at their schools. One of the things that came up was one of our group members shared the importance of creating a space where different opinions, different perspectives are invited and valued. Instead of kind of informing the agenda ahead of time, which was great. We learned about one of our group members who's kind of leading a series over summers for teachers who are opting into it, and then launching a staff-wide initiative in the fall as well, which was great. And then we kind of talked about how do we outreach to families, kind of looking ahead on sort of towards the hybrid learning model, but also reflecting on the lessons from the emergency online instruction. And we heard some great ideas around you know, leveraging social media to reach out to students, and how that has been something that has been extremely successful. You know, leveraging sort of Google Voice as a tool to do outreach directly to students, and that sort of has led to some positive outcomes as well. You know, we kind of talked about, we actually interestingly had, I don't know if Marianne Santos is still here, we had one of our group members who's you know, so a scientist. She's currently not an administrator or an educator in schools, but she kind of talked about her own lived experience as a graduate student, as an undergrad student, and how you know, people in authority kind of assumed that she would be somebody who's meek, who's you know, who's going to not really advocate for herself, and how she's kind of broken that barrier as well, and is kind of looking to partner with educators to bring sort of a more blended science, technology, you know, entertainment, media kind of education to our schools as well. So that was a very, and I really appreciate, I don't know if Marianne Santos is still here, but Marianne, if you're listening, thank you so much for sharing that perspective too.
Sure, I'm still here. So I would love to, okay, I don't know where my camera is. Here, I would love to connect with, you know, with you guys and see how we can work together for that STEM, actually it's STEAM, right? Science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. So if we could work together to, I said, inspire, engage the future scientists, future educators, future animators, right? So let's work together. I'd be happy to talk with you. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Bhavna, for sharing. How about Isaac?
Yeah, so in our group number 4, we had talked about just being comfortable with yourself, being comfortable with your leadership style. So although it may not fit with what the quote unquote norm is in terms of leadership, there are always ways that you can contribute and lead, even if that looks different than that. Also being comfortable and cognizant of those stereotypes that others may perceive you, and how that sort of shapes the way that you advocate for others. So being mindful of those and the way that you craft language and approach situations, being aware is really important. Another thing mentioned in our group discussion was the importance of cultural competency, especially during at-home learning that's going on, because we've really stepped further into the homes of our students these days. And so those that are school reach personnel or other individuals that do reach out to our families have to really have that cultural competency lens and understand the families that they are working with and see it from that lens. So that's really important. So that professional development piece. with regards to lifting each other up and strengthening our voice, it was mentioned that mentoring is important to lift one another up, and how ACSA really supports us as minorities in refilling our buckets and leading that charge. With the fifth question is just in solidarity with our fellow African American leaders in this crucial time, is just the need to be comfortable in having uncomfortable conversations and really being intentional about equity and calling things out when they need to be called out. And although some of us may be a little hesitant because of perhaps job security or things like that, it's really important, and it's, you know, everyone's own personal decision, but we also felt that it's important to call things out when there are inequities that are blatant or even unseen. But when we do notice it, we need to speak up about it. So those are some of the things that we talked about.
Awesome. All right, last group, Shayna.
Sure. So in our group, there was a definite theme around just being deliberate in our actions moving forward. A couple of our members talked about their lived experiences of a time when there were not just low expectations for Asian Americans, but no expectations for them to even be in administration, and just the lack of role models that presented themselves at that time. So now being more deliberate about modeling and mentoring for other Asian American administrators, leaders, helping them find their voice, because too often we're in isolation and we need others to help us navigate that. A couple other points too is around leveling the playing field. So right now it seems like if districts are even allowing or opening those opportunities for Asian American Pacific Islanders to have a piece of the pie, we're all competing against one another for that little piece of the pie. So how can we open up opportunities in our districts so that there's plenty of access for all of us? And then finally, around not being afraid to confront the data when it comes to being in solidarity with our fellow Black leaders, but in general too, asking how have we been complicit in the way we are today? How did we get here? Were we a part of that? Being uncomfortable to have the conversation like Isaac had mentioned, and then just putting the data out there, really calling it out, narrowing it down by race and ethnicity, and shining a light on it so that everyone can have access to it and see really what's going on.
Fantastic. It sounds like we had some really meaningful discussions in all of our breakout rooms. There never seems to be enough time to have these discussions. So one of our promises is to make sure that we're able to continue them on a more regular basis, especially now on a virtual platform. It's really so much easier to put these things together and give us opportunities to have these hard conversations with each other, unlike we would have some of the issues that we run into having in-person events. So, you know, I want to thank everyone that showed up today. I especially want to thank our non-Asian, non-Indian, non-Pacific Islander members who showed up to support and to listen to some of the issues and challenges that Asian American Pacific Islanders experience on a daily basis. And we hope that this conversation, through this conversation and through this networking event, that you know also that we are as equally interested in holding up our other colleagues of color. And we really want to work in tandem with all of you to make sure that, you know, ACSA is moving in the right direction so that we're championing all people of color. And with that, I will call on my colleague, Adne.
Can I quickly just interrupt? I'd like to, if you can take a few seconds, I'd like to invite Lorianne Leota. She was in my breakout group 1, and she shared a very powerful story of a conversation she had with a staff member, which I think we would all benefit from in terms of our learning. Lorianne.
Hello, I'm an assistant principal in Bellflower Unified, and the school that I am at is used to having a certain population. And so now that we have more minority students coming into our school district, some of the staff has not quite adjusted to that just yet. And so I spoke of one particular incident where a staff member made a comment that outside of a school setting would be called out immediately for being racist. And so I had to have that uncomfortable conversation and tell that staff member that what they said could be really hurtful, and allow them to have that opportunity to hear me out and listen to them as to what they believed their reasoning was for saying it. It resulted in not necessarily the most pleasant conversation, and it wasn't something that I was required to do for disciplinary action or anything. I just wanted to make sure that they were aware of what they were doing, so that they knew how to do things better moving forward. As a result of the conversation, they decided that they would go ahead and have a conversation or a conference with the parent and student and ask that I be present, and apologized and made sure that they explained that they understood that their perspective was wrong. And moving forward, I saw far less referrals from that teacher with respect to students of color, because I saw a lot of them. And so I think that although it's uncomfortable for us to have these conversations, it's incredibly important that we do, because sometimes, you know, people have implicit bias and they're not really aware that they are actually taking the time to refer more students of color or, you know, Asian Pacific Island students, and they need to actually be reflective of their practice and realize that. And sometimes it takes having those conversations for them to be able to do that. Thank you.
Can I also ask a question? Since the topic is about breaking the bamboo ceiling as part of our conversation today, I'm wondering, as an organization, ACSA, if there's been data presented to different districts reflecting the demographic of their administrators to their student population in terms of percentage of administrators that are of color for each district, because we are individually moving or trying to move the needle, but as an organization, is there a place for ACSA to perhaps provide this data to school districts so that they can see in political, you know, empirical data reflecting the percentage of people of colors who are in the top administrative positions? I think that's important as an organization to raise that. We are keenly aware of it, and we've talked about it in-house, but have we done anything outreach to districts to give them a data so superintendents sitting there looking at their HR hiring and saying, you know, if our demographic is 50% of a certain color, then our administration should also reflect that percentage. That makes sense to me. So I'm just wondering, as an organization, has ACSA kind of embarked on that kind of work? Because that's powerful work that is bigger than you and I. It's more of an organizational kind of mission to raise that kind of awareness.
And I'm going to say that we, while we haven't formalized that particular strategy, that through these types of events and through the articles that we publish in EdCal and through the, you know, the information that we share with our equity committee and the folks that serve on those types of task forces, that we provide information that we think is helpful to help districts make those types of decisions and kind of change the way that they do their hiring. But I don't think we've formalized that to a point where, you know, it might actually be taken as a strategy to implement at the local levels. And I'm going to bring Adne into this conversation, and maybe he can, you know, give us some information about things that we can look out for to come in terms of some of the equity work that the organization is working on. Adne, are you still here?
I appreciate it. Carol, thank you for bringing this up. I appreciate it because this is the important work that we need to do as an organization. And it's certainly something that I have, in my short time, been thinking about. When we are looking at our student body and the population in our student body, we need to have this conversation about what it looks like to diversify the workforce that are reaching our students, both at the teacher level and at the administrator level. And that's going to take a lot of hard work and a lot of data-driven discussions, as well as strategies, right? And so, yes, it's something that that we plan to look at as an organization. We haven't done all of that work quite yet. But in the past couple of weeks, that is a discussion that we're certainly looking at. And it's going to take work with our superintendents as leaders. It's going to take work with our human resource directors to have some intentionality when they are looking at who they're hiring in our school systems and how they support them in order to get them into administrative positions. And you're right, the data does start with that. And that is something that I just have been beginning to really examine and look for some partners who can do some of that research for us. So yes, thank you. Lorianne, I also want to say, to give a big shout out and a big thank you to you. This work to support all of the people of color in our system is going to take very challenging and courageous conversations with all of the other staff. It's important that we begin to have these conversations and we build our skill set around discussing the issues of race and the impact of stereotypes have on the students and their learning. And that's another piece that ACSA is really going to be working on this year. And we hope to be able to give all of you those tools when you're seeing that implicit bias or that racism constricting or hampering the education of our students. Because we've seen it historically throughout the system, and we need to begin to have the courage and the ability to break down some of this institutional racism that exists, because we know that's why certain groups of students don't achieve. And it's because folks don't believe that they can achieve. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think that's going to be another big piece that ACSA needs to work on to provide you all of the tools, whether it's giving you the space like today to have these conversations, to talk about the ceilings that exist, or to have this discussion so that you too can come with the courage to have a courageous conversation in your school district or in your school site in order to support our students moving forward. And so I appreciate this. Certainly Margarita and I, we're excited. I mean, I don't know if we expected to have this many people on today. So, you know, it energizes us to move forward so we can have more conversations like this throughout the year. We really appreciate it. And like, I'm looking at my screen and I see so many different faces. I'm so excited on it. I mean, it just, all the faces on my screen, it just energizes me to get up tomorrow morning and to get cracking in the type of work that we need to provide and the type of support that we need to provide. So again, thank you very much for joining us for this evening. We were trying to keep it to a certain time frame, and we could probably go on for another hour if we needed to. But I thank you all for joining us today. We really look forward to providing additional opportunities for this in the future. And so
and so keep your eyes open for more information for future networks. And the next time we get together, we'll bring more research, we'll bring more demographics, both from an organizational perspective as well as from kind of a state of California, you know, education perspective, so we can have some deeper conversations about where we need to go next. All right, great seeing everybody. Thank you so much. And I hope this was a valuable experience for you. So remember, think about your membership and the value of membership and why ACSA is so valuable. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.